According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, the United States is in significant need of investment in its infrastructure. Much of it dates from the big building programs of the 1930s and 50s and requires expansion, replacement or repair. We should stress that the issues explored in this video look at some of the worst case examples. The country is one of the world's leading economies and is far from grinding to a halt. Infrastructure is a huge enabler for America's economy. It's estimated that some $3.6 trillion are needed to bring everything up to scratch by 2020, and that current investment trends could end up costing American families $28,000 in income by then. Public infrastructure spending as a share of the country's GDP has dropped to almost half that of European levels in recent years. The intent to address the issue is there, but action has been slow due to America's partisan political system and the sheer level of funding now required. So where is action most needed? The last major airport to be constructed in the US was Denver some 20 years ago. Passenger volumes have increased almost 12 times over since then, and the squeeze is being felt in some larger hubs, with long queues at customs and check-in areas. Many air traffic control systems also need modernising to improve efficiency. Vice President Joe Biden infamously likened LaGuardia to a third world country, though a major upgrade of that airport is now planned. Airport Council International estimate that $75 billion need to be spent on US airports over the next 5 years. The growth of the US economy is closely linked to its highway network, enabling the shipment of goods around the country. The road system has played a key part in America's economic growth over the last 50 years. The key challenge in upgrading the highways is funding. Highway fund revenues, made up of a mixture of fuel tax and the federal state-matched funding mechanism, have proved increasingly inefficient at raising the sums needed. The Congressional Budget Office now estimate an annual shortfall in highways funding of $15 billion. Congress is forced to authorise transfers from the US Treasury's General Fund to make ends meet. Solutions include private investments or additional taxes or mileage-based fees on drivers, neither of which are politically popular. It's a similar story for the country's rail network. Some $20 billion are required just to upgrade Amtrak's railway in the Northeast Corridor. In New York, the Hudson River Tunnel is well over 100 years old, yet still handles some 230,000 commuters every day. The Portal Bridge that connects New Jersey with New York's Penn Station was designed in the 19th century, but has 450 trains crossing it every 24 hours, the most heavily trafficked rail span in the Western Hemisphere. The bridge's position on the river means that it must swing open to enable large boats to pass. The rail tracks don't always realign when it swings back into place, causing delays for passengers. A much needed replacement is now planned. Staying with bridges, the American Society of Civil Engineers estimate that 1 in 10 bridges in the US are deemed to be structurally deficient. These bridges are safe, but they now have reduced weight allowances and speed limits. Compounding matters, some 14% of US bridges are deemed functionally obsolete, meaning that they are now no longer suited to their current task. Washington DC's Arlington Memorial Bridge, an example that sits particularly close to Congress, was built in 1932 and now needs a $250 million upgrade. America's inland waterways and canals move the equivalent of 51 million lorry loads of goods every year, yet many of these routes are now over 50 years old. The US Army Corps of Engineers are responsible for maintaining much of the system and estimate that $13 billion need to be invested by 2020 on a mixture of new lock and dam facilities and on improving the existing system. The situation is such that many barge operators now support an increase in their own fuel taxes to help fund the works. Much of the US budget allocated to waterways has been soaked up by a $3 billion investment project on the Ohio River, which is expected to complete in 2020. Just 4% of dams in the US are managed directly by the federal government. Most are overseen by state rather than federal funding, and they lack the cash needed for maintenance and improvements. Whilst none are in a dangerous condition, it's estimated that an upgrade of all the dams in need of repair would cost $21 billion. Whilst America's ports are in comparatively good condition, the navigation channels to them are in need of attention. Channels as deep as 45 feet, that's nearly 14 metres, must be dredged to accommodate the new supersized Panamax ships. Such work does yield returns. The American Society of Civil Engineers estimate that deepening a channel at the port of Savannah in Georgia by just 6 feet, or 1.8 metres, could reduce shipping costs by 15 to 20%. Other considerations include the upgrading of the ageing pipeline networks carrying gas and water, which could cost as much as $270 billion. There's also the need to further develop 5G and superfast broadband capability, although policy incentives that drive private investment in these areas have proven extremely effective in recent years. If you enjoyed this video and would like to get more like this, subscribe to the B1M.